Hi, I'm Stephen Herrera, and this is Herrera on Hollywood. Today, I am interviewing Jeff Kwitny. Jeff is a director known for the sci-fi film Illegal Alien, as well as the horror films ICED and Beyond the Door 3. In 1993, he directed the drama film Lightning in a Bottle, which won the top prize at the Houston Film Festival. After a brief theatrical run, Lifetime Channel bought it and aired it 77 times. After directing films, he wrote for several animated television series, including Animaniacs, Road Rovers, Cow and Chicken, and Hysteria, which he conceived. In 1995, he won a Daytime Emmy Award for his work on an episode of Animaniacs, which was produced by Steven Spielberg. After his work as a director and writer ended, Jeff started a new career as a teacher. Jeff, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So let's start by talking about how you started as a film director. Can you tell the story of how you started as a director?
It's a long story, so I'll try to edit we'll use film language here. I'm going to edit it down, and it started in college. Well, I'll even take it further back. When I was a kid, I had an 8mm Brownie movie camera my dad gave me when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And I'd make these little short films with the kids in the neighborhood, and fell in love with doing. I mean, I knew I had a feel for it because I was obsessed, and I would get these things cut together and then air them for the neighbors and little movies. So I had that in the back of my mind. However, when I went to college, I went to UC Berkeley here in California and majored in comparative literature, and then ended up with a master's in English. But the time while I was there, I was taking film courses and learning how to edit and learn cinematography and worked on local projects. And then when I graduated, I joined a group of filmmakers in San Francisco, and we worked for about a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, making each other's movies. And it was during that time that I shot this short film called Illegal Alien. It was a parody of the film Alien. And a little story that goes with that. I mean, we really had a blast making it. I don't know if any people in your audience are filmmakers, they know what I mean. Filmmaking can be a lot of fun if you're just doing it, for fun and not for a living. And so we worked on this film. I was directing, and then we had about 10 people all pitching in, working for free. And it turned out okay. It was a 22-minute film, but what I did was I knew the producer of Ridley Scott's film, and I sent it to him in Hollywood. I was still living in San Francisco, and he got the film, and he said, you need to come down here. I need to meet you. And so I'm blanking out on the producer's name, so your audience could look it up. Whoever produced Alien. Right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, I met with him in his office, and he asked me if he could send the film to Ridley, and I said, of course. So I guess it's probably sitting on his shelf somewhere right now. So this was right after Alien came out. It was around 1980 in there or so when we did that film, and Alien came out in 79, I think. So that opened up some doors for me. I got a job at Roger Corman's company, and that back then called New Horizons. It's the company that all these great filmmakers got their starts at, including James Cameron. And there's a story that goes with that because I had that little film, and was doing all kinds of jobs, including production assistant and, learning how to make movies the Roger Corman way, which is with no money and everybody pitching in, which is all I've really known. And I got a job offer by the producer who produced Cameron's first film, Piranha 2. And Cameron had just been there before I got there, but the producer, Ovidio Assonitis, an Italian producer, had got him to do Piranha 2. That was, according to Cameron, a disaster. But I had decided this is somebody I want to work for. Who knows? Ovidio hired me to write several scripts for him, and then he saw my little movie. And he also, in that interim, while I was writing scripts for him, I made another feature film called ICED, which, so I was writing for Ovidio in Italy, but came back and did ICED, and which I can talk about endlessly. But to make a long story short, Ovidio saw ICED and he said, here's a guy who made a film for $150,000. My kind of guy, So he hired me to do Beyond the Door 3, which is a feature that was about 100 times bigger budget than ICED was. That's another story too.
Okay, so this is a great story about how you got started in directing. We've already talked about Illegal Alien, your short film that was a parody of Alien from Ridley Scott.
Right.
And then we've already touched on ICED. Now, I want to tell the audience that I met you at an event, a magazine signing event for Delirium magazine, and it was at Dark Delicacies. Mm-hmm. And the reason you were there was because there was a feature story in the magazine about ICED, and it was celebrating the 30th anniversary of ICED. So ICED is a horror film with a unique setting. Unlike other slashers, which take place on college campuses or summer camps, ICED takes place on a ski resort. And I know that the filming location was Utah. Can you talk more about the origin of ICED?
Yes, it's actually quite a story. I'm not sure how I lived through it, actually, but anyway, it was my first feature-length film. And so I met Joe Johnston, who was the writer of the script originally called Blizzard of Blood, which I think is a great title. I wish we could have kept it, but that's another story. Blizzard of Blood. And he knew my short film, the one Illegal Alien, but he met me because I was working at the same company where he was working for Roger Corman and New Horizons Pictures. He'd done Slumber Party Massacre. So the cast was made up entirely of his friends from that movie. And then he wrote this script. He asked me, because we hit it off. He was taking a huge risk because I hadn't done a feature. And so I took this thing on, and we went to Utah in January. I think it was 87, I want to say, and shot this movie in the dead of winter, which is a nightmare. You don't want to do that, but we wanted authentic snow in this snow story. The script was basically formulaic. You've seen it before. A bunch of young people get together at a ski resort, and they get killed one by one in awful ways. And who's the murderer? And you got to watch the movie to find out who the murderer is. So directing it was extremely fun. I had a good time. Everybody was having fun, but we had about $150,000 to make this movie, believe it or not. It had 18 days to shoot it in. And I'd storyboarded it. I worked on this like crazy in advance. And then I realized that you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if you don't have the money to fulfill them, then you're out of luck. So I had all these scenes conceived, which I think would have been fantastic. Would have made the movie awfully good, but we couldn't do them. There's a scene, for example, in the movie where, and this is in that magazine article, because they used my storyboard in that article, where one of the young women gets killed with an icicle. So the bad guy grabs her and plunges this icicle into an eye. Now that sounds all lovely and fine. Let me tell you, when you're making the movie, you're not really experiencing the horror of it particularly, because it's all, you're just trying to figure out how to make it work. But I needed to have a dummy head and have this thing go through, and they couldn't do it. And we ran out of time. We had to go to the next location. I go, oh no, this is like a great scene. So all you see in the movie is the icicle coming down towards her, and we cut away. And it's that kind of cop out that, really, but we get to see her later sitting in a car with this icicle in her eye, which we managed to get a fake icicle and install it and, fix it up. And it was pretty funny. It's that kind of stuff.
And that shot, there's a picture of it in the magazine article. And when you're watching the movie, that still is actually from the next day in the story. And it's just funny because the icicle still has not melted.
No, and that's another thing that drove me crazy, because the people think that the director's an idiot. But let me just tell you, you've got a crew, you've got 15 minutes to get the shot, and we can't get a real icicle installed on her face with the blood and all that, because it just simply they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they did a kind of extemporaneous simple method. And once again, I'm like going, oh boy.
So this movie is great on many levels, but firstly because it's authentic. Like you said, it takes place in Utah, and you were shooting in January of '87, the dead of winter. And it's January because if you look at the beginning of the movie, when they're inside of a bar at the ski resort, you can see decorations that say Happy New Year.
Yeah, yeah.
So going back to the kills, I want to talk about the first kill in the movie that involves a snow machine. I'm wondering if you could tell us, what was that scene supposed to look like?
Yeah, this is another example of me going, are you kidding me? I get on location, they got this thing, and everybody knows what's supposed to happen. They have my storyboard. We've had meetings before. I tell them what I need, what we need to have happen. And we get there and this thing doesn't really move. It's supposed to chase this guy down and run him over. And I said, are you kidding? What are we going to do? And so we shot it the best I could. And I told them, this didn't work. We're cutting the scene. So in the post-production, which is a whole other story, it ended up back in the movie, because I think they were just trying to pad it with everything they had. There wasn't much left to cut out. And I was so embarrassed by that. But this is filmmaking at its low end.
Let's talk about the cast in this film. Two of the people in the movie were in Slumber Party Massacre. So you had Deborah De Lisso, who was one of the main characters in Slumber Party Massacre, as well as Joseph A. Johnson.
Yeah, Joe Johnson was my boss. Technically, he hired me. Joe was one of the actors. I think there were a couple more. Maybe Elizabeth Gorsey might have been in it too.
And Lisa Loring.
Lisa Loring, who everyone knows from the Addams Family?
Yes.
And I was a little shocked when she showed up. She wasn't the little girl I remembered.
So what was it like working with these actors? Many of them were new actors.
Yeah, they really weren't experienced actors, but none of us was experienced. This is my first film. Everybody working on it was a novice. It was not much more professional than the student film I had done before. So a little bit more involved.
So were some of the older actors or more experienced actors like Joseph Johnson and Deborah De Lisso, were they able to help lift the performances of the other actors? Did they get along well off camera?
Yeah, I'd worked with actors in college and had done a lot of acting myself, took acting workshops. So I had some skills on hand to work with them. And yes, Joe was a great leader. He was wonderful to work with, a nice guy, and he really took them all under his wing. And that's why I think it was a lot of fun to make the film, because we basically, I think we had more fun making the film than anyone's going to have watching it. Let me put it that way.
I don't know. I think there's a
Okay.
big audience. This film has become a cult favorite.
I know. I'm fully aware of that.
So I want to talk about the release of the film. I know that you shot it back in '87, and then when you wrapped, you went back to Los Angeles. You left Utah, went back to LA, and then about a year and a half later, it was finally finished and there was a theatrical premiere for it, right?
Yeah, well, no, let me tell you, there was a lot of drama involved, and it's kind of a sad scoot story, but it's fitting in a way because of the type of movie we made. But the executive producer and his line producer partner got into some real trouble with some of the other people in the company. Joe Johnson was telling me a little bit about their problems of people not getting paid, and this and that was going on. I got paid, so I was happy about it, but there was trouble. And this is a true story. The one of the people in the company hired 2 hitmen to take out the executive producer. He was coming out of that very office that I've been in many times to go to his car, and somebody shot him, and I'm not making this up, they shot him with a bow and arrow.
This was actually mentioned in the article.
Yeah, it's with a crossbow. It's a true story. Last I heard, he was on life support. Eventually the people were all arrested, the hitman and also the accomplices and the person who ordered the killing. They all went to trial, and I don't know where they are today. But what happened, as far as I'm concerned, was this happened immediately after we wrapped. And the original film, this is back in the days when we used film, was sitting in cans in Park City, Utah, I think. And meanwhile, the 2 producers fled. I mean, one was in the hospital and the other one fled. He disappeared. And so there were some people that hadn't been paid, especially the first assistant director. So he was holding the film for ransom. I suddenly took it upon myself. I went out and got a friend of a friend who was a film industry attorney who put up the money to rescue the film. He paid off the debts, paid for the film to be shipped to Hollywood, asked me to work on in the post-production. We hired an editor. We took it to Photochem, which is a post-production company in North Hollywood. We put this film together. But it took some time to get the film cans. That's where all the time got eaten up, as I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get this thing. I wasn't about to put the money up and do it myself. I wish I had. I was original part owner because of that, and I've never been paid.
So they did a cast screening of it after you did the final cut, right?
No, Joe disappeared too. He fled to Italy. Everybody concerned with that movie disappeared. I lost touch with them. Nobody reached out to me. I think they were all scared, honestly, as I was too. But we got the film put together, and the guy, his name was Michael Biber, who produced this film, ultimately sold it to Prism Entertainment, which is a kind of a video company in those days, in the 80s. and it took off from there. So it never had a theatrical screening.
Oh, okay. But it was picked up by Prism Entertainment and released on VHS.
Yes.
And since then, it has not had an official DVD or Blu-ray release.
No.
And I really hope that a company like Vinegar Syndrome will release this title on Blu-ray disc.
Yes, I agree. They've actually contacted me several times, and they would like to make me a partner if I can get the darn original film, but we can't find it. Nobody knows where it is.
Oh,
Not even
so they
photo
have
pins.
reached
They
out
don't.
to you.
If I find that film, I'm going to be rich.
Okay. So now that we've talked about ICED, I want to move on and talk about Beyond the Door 3.
Right.
And that is a unique supernatural horror film about a group of college students traveling to Yugoslavia to see a local ritual. But there's more to it than that, and I'm going to let the viewers discover that. But this film was originally called Amok Train, and it was shot in Belgrade, Serbia. And it features some genuinely creepy scenes aboard this train that's possessed. Can you talk about the origin of this film and some of the challenges?
I'd love to. That was a big adventure in my life. It was really a considerably big production compared to ICED. And it was ICED ultimately that got me that job. Ovidio saw that, and that was when he already knew me from writing for him. I'd written a number of scripts for him, but when he saw that, he thought, well, okay. I pitched the original idea to him, and it was based on a Jerzy Kosinski novel called The Painted Bird. And it was about a young man who wanders into an Eastern European forest and finds himself back in the 13th century. And I like that concept. And it is absolutely terrifying what happens to him. It's a great novel. It's a wonderful work of literature. So Ovidio hears that, and he says, well, what can we do with that? And I said, well, why don't we have a bunch of, because I just done ICED, which was about a bunch of kids getting killed on a ski trip. I said, well, why don't we have these college students doing a field trip to Yugoslavia, and they go back in time there, and they meet with devil worshipers and all that kind of stuff that you would find in a superstitious medieval village. And he loved it because he'd made a fortune on the original Beyond the Door. He told me the story on how he invested $150,000 on that film and made $25 million on it. So he's trying to duplicate that. The problem for me was that I wanted it to be pretty straightforward, real horror of going into another world of medieval thinking, that barbarism that you might find there with backwardness, and that appealed to me. But he had just seen a movie called The Runaway Train. He says, well, we got to have a train in this because I want a train. And I said, how are we going to do that? So it doesn't make any sense. Ovidio doesn't care if anything makes any sense. His movies are like your nightmares. They're just jumbled images and ideas that he doesn't care about explaining or making sense of anything. So I sketched out the original script, and then later on another person, Sheila Goldberg, wrote another version of my original script. But so he said, do you want to direct it? And I said, are you kidding me? This would be so much fun. He says, well, I can do this film in Yugoslavia for pennies compared to what it would cost if we shot it here in Italy. You can get extras to work for $1 a day there. He told, they just don't have any union problems or any of that. And everything is so cheap. The hotels that we stayed in, and we got a steam train for a week. We could do anything with, would have normally cost a fortune. We got it for next to nothing. It was originally called The Train because we didn't have a title. It was just a working title, The Train. Beyond the Door 3 was added much later when the film distribution company took it over. And they were just, capitalizing on another successful couple of movies. It was really quite an experience because at that time, Yugoslavia was in the midst of a civil war. There were demonstrations going all the time. There were battles going on in villages, skirmishes. In fact, when we would go out to shoot on location, the local government gave us militia. These armed military guys would come out with machine gun nests, plant them around our location to protect us while we were shooting. And that's
amazing.
How dangerous it was. It was amazing. I was pretty scared. It was pretty nerve-wracking. And then they were telling me, I met with the ambassador, the American ambassador, while we were there, had dinner with him, and he was saying, well, they're probably going to shut down the airport, so we're leaving. So he and his wife had their bags packed, ready to go. And I said, wait a minute, we still have a couple weeks of shooting left to do. And I said, well, that's not good. And he says, well, if you have to stay, you can call here. We'll do what we can do. But they said they might shut the airport down, so we won't be able to get out. It was under those conditions that we shot that movie.
That sounds like it was very high pressure conditions,
to say the least. And one more footnote. Before I flew on the plane to Yugoslavia, I called James Cameron. He was shooting The Abyss at the time for 20th Century Fox. I just picked up the phone and I called 20th Century Fox, got the main switchboard, and I said, could you put James Cameron on the phone? And she said, who's calling, please? And I said, just tell him it's Jeff Kwitny. I'm making a movie for Ovidio Assonitis. And she said, okay, I'll tell him that. 30 minutes later, he calls me back. He was on the set and he stopped shooting to call me back because he wanted to tell me, don't make the movie. Ovidio's crazy. You'll have a nightmare. Don't do it.
And that was in the article in the Delirium magazine as well.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite stories. And he was fired 2 weeks into Piranha 2. And he told me this whole thing on the phone, why I shouldn't do the movie. He says, Ovidio takes over. He fired me. I stood on the sidelines watching Ovidio ruin my movie. And then I got sick, he said. He had a 102, 103 degree temperature. He was stuck in his hotel. He said Ovidio had cut off his per diem. Wow. And it was a horrible experience. But I said, wait a minute. But then, didn't you take the finished product to Orion Pictures? And based on that film, he got the job for Terminator. So I said, that seems like a pretty good deal to me. And he says, well, don't you have any other projects you can do? I said, no, this is the only film I've been offered. And he says, well, just watch out for so-and-so and so-and-so. He gave me all this advice.
Yes, I remember in the article that you said James Cameron warned you not to be involved, but you said that you needed the experience, so you did it anyway.
That's right. Absolutely.
So I want to tell our audience that Beyond the Door 3 is available on Blu-ray disc from Vinegar Syndrome, and you can purchase it on vinegarsyndrome.com. Right now, Vinegar Syndrome is having its halfway to Black Friday sale, so it would be a great time to purchase a copy of Beyond the Door 3.
Yes, I'd like to mention that they have an interview of me at on one of the discs, and they did a fantastic job on that. It is beautifully done.
So the first 3 films that you directed were all in the sci-fi horror genre. Did you intend to start directing horror films, or did things just work out that way?
Well, that's a very good question. I kind of, once I did that low budget short 22-minute film Illegal Alien, because I was so jazzed with Ridley Scott's movie. When I saw Alien, I thought, this is some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen. And I'm a huge fan of sci-fi. So I kind of want, that's what I want to do. And once I made that film, it was kind of how I set myself on a path. You know, it's like I started that train moving and I couldn't stop it. That's fine. But the problem I encountered is when you work for people like Roger Corman or Ovidio Assonitis, these are low budget filmmakers. And that it's really tough filmmaking. It is not for the faint of heart. It is, that genre poses lots of problems. So, you know, I love it. I like horror films and sci-fi movies. I wished I'd gotten a big budget Cameron type movie, but that never happened.
But you did transition to a drama film. You directed Lightning in a Bottle in 1993, and that was a serious drama. It received praise for directing, acting, and music. I want to ask you, how did you get hired to direct that film? And then what are the memories that you have of working with Linda Carter, Dee Wallace, and Martin Kove?
Yes, thank you for asking. It's a film I'm very proud of. Again, low budget film. We had $1 million to shoot that, and which was a step down from Ovidio's, which came to about $4 million, although he probably didn't spend that much, but that's what it was in Yugoslavia. So the film was hard for me to get because I had only sci-fi film experience. And these people were not looking for a sci-fi director. But, you know, it was one of those things where I was introduced to them through a friend who said I could direct, I would be a good guy for this. And I really had to do some song and dance. I had to really convince them that I could do a serious drama and work with real actors and instead of these young, you know, novice actors that I'd only known. And so it eventually, after, you know, keep coming back at them, keep coming with them, I met their investors. I did a presentation. I found clips from my movies I could show that didn't scare them off. They looked a little dubious. But anyway, I had a couple of film credits, so that helped. And plus I was willing to do the film on a budget, so that helped. And I won the, I guess, the loyalty of the producer and the writer. Johnny Linzel had written the script, was also the producer. And she took a liking to me, and I think she just trusted me. Took a leap of faith. And Linda Carter, of course, I grew up watching her in Wonder Woman when I was a kid, but she had reached a point in her life, in her career, when she wanted to do real serious drama. So she had been taking actors workshops and method acting, learning how to do that, and wanted to do this kind of a movie where she could really get into the raw emotion of her character. And Dee Wallace Stone had done The Howling and E.T. And I knew her from E.T. because she got an Oscar nomination for that, because her performance was really good. And then she did 10 with Dudley Moore. And she plays this alcoholic he meets in a bar, and she is fabulous. So I thought, because the producers asked me, you know, they give me headshots, they give me lists. They had a casting director I worked with, and I looked at that and I thought this would be interesting, because I knew they were going to have Linda Carter. She was the reason they got financing. She was on from day one before I even came on. But I thought Dee Wallace Stone, who plays her 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 foil in the film, would be an interesting match because Dee Wallace is a serious method actress. She's into it. And I thought, well, this is going to pit two actors together. This is always a good thing because they're each trying to do their best, right? They're competing with each other to somewhat. It's happening. It's a dynamic with actors. So Martin Cove was one of the many people we auditioned, and he was he plays a very creepy lawyer husband in the film. He's a bad guy, convinces his wife basically not to come forth and tell the truth about a car accident and her guilt in it. And he's a slimy guy. And Martin was really good at that. And Linda agreed to, she had to have the final okay. She was going to be playing his wife. So he came on. And then the rest of the characters were people I had auditioned during, during the pre-production process.
And the experience of making this film, how did it compare to making the low-budget horror films?
Well, it was a completely different experience. It was purely actors acting without special effects there was a car accident and a big deal, right? That was one night's work. But the rest of the film was just interior scenes with people talking. And I really relished that. It gave me a fresh new challenge. But at the same time, there were issues like there are on every movie. There are personalities that clash. There's tempers that arise. There are disagreements on what should be done on this or that. So making movies is a lot of work. It is not as glamorous as people might think. It's a lot of down in the gritty, into the dirt of filmmaking. And whereas we had a revolution, a civil war going on in Yugoslavia, and then we had the dead of winter on ice, but this one had big personalities I was dealing with. I don't know which was harder.